Almost everything you have been told about emergency funds was written for somebody earning more than you. 3 to 6 months of expenses, 20% of your income. Cut the coffee, cut the streaming, cut the one thing you actually look forward to. None of that survives contact with a real budget where the money is spoken for before it lands. So you try it. It works for 2 weeks. Something breaks in week 3 and the whole thing collapses. And then you conclude the problem is you. It isn't. The advice was built for a different income, and nobody mentioned that when they handed it to you. There are 8 things that actually work when the margin is thin. They are not the ones you've heard. And the first one is the reason every other attempt failed. I want to be clear about who this is for. This is not for somebody with $300 spare a month wondering where to put it. This is for the person whose account is at $40 4 days before payday and has been for 2 years. Most of what's on this list costs nothing to start. It's a different order of operations rather than a bigger number. But I am not going to stand here and tell you income doesn't matter. It obviously does. A higher income creates more room, and we should never pretend otherwise. There are real structural limits here. If what you earn genuinely does not cover the necessities, then no amount of rearranging will manufacture a surplus that isn't there. That is not a discipline problem, and nothing on this list will fix it. What this is for is the gap in between, the months where there is a little room, and nobody ever showed you what to do with it. Count how many you already do. Some of you are doing 4 of these without knowing they had names. And stay for number 8, because it's the one that decides whether any of the others last. Number 1, the money goes out before you get a chance to have it. Not at the end of the month, not what's left over. There is never anything left over. That's not a discipline problem, that's arithmetic. Money sitting in a current account for a month tends to find a use because a month is long enough for something to go wrong. So for the people who manage this, it leaves on payday, automatically, before they looked at the balance. The reason that matters more than anything else on this list is that it removes the decision. Every time saving requires somebody to choose to save, they're spending willpower they need elsewhere. And on a tight income, you are already making financial decisions all day long that people with money never have to make at all. It isn't about discipline. It's about removing one more decision from a day that already has too many. There's a line in Proverbs chapter 6 that people usually quote to make somebody feel lazy. I want to read you the part they skip. Without having any chief, officer, or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. That's about the ant. And the detail Solomon is pointing at is not that she works hard. It's that there is nobody telling her to. No chief, no officer, no ruler, nobody sends the reminder. That's the whole problem with saving on a low income. There is no system anywhere in your life that will do this for you or even mention it. So the system has to be one you build once and then never rely on yourself to remember. Number 2, they start with an amount that feels almost embarrassing. $10, $15. An amount so small that saying it out loud feels like a joke, given what a real emergency costs. Here is why that works, and it's not what people think. It is not that $10 a week becomes meaningful, although over a year it does. It's that $10 a week never fails. Think about what you're actually building in the first 3 months. You are not building a fund. You are building evidence. Evidence that money can leave your account on a Friday and the world does not end. Evidence that you are a person who has savings, which for a lot of people is a completely new identity. At 100, it breaks in week 3. And breaking it teaches somebody that they can't do this. At 10, it doesn't break. and not breaking it teaches them something far more useful. The amount is not the point at the start. The unbroken run is the point. It goes up later, once it's boring. And it does get boring. That's the signal. Number 3, the money is somewhere genuinely inconvenient to get at. Different bank, no card attached, not visible when you open your main banking app. Ideally, something that takes a day or two to move back. Everybody's instinct is that this is about temptation, and partly it is, but the real mechanism is different. Most money doesn't get spent because you decided to spend it. It gets spent because it was available at a moment when you were tired, or something had gone wrong, or the checkout was right there and the balance said yes. Friction doesn't stop anybody deciding. Friction inserts a delay between the impulse and the money. And an impulse that has to wait a day rarely arrives the next morning with the same force. That's the whole reason cooling off periods exist in consumer law at all. There's a version of this I like even more if you've got the option. Somewhere that isn't a bank at all, a credit union, an account in a place you'd have to go to, something with a small amount of hassle attached. Hassle is not a flaw in the system. On a low income, hassle is the security feature you can actually afford. But there is a limit, and I want to be straight about it because this is the one place the advice can genuinely hurt you. The money has to be reachable in a real emergency. If it takes a week to get at, then in the week it's actually needed, the boiler goes on a credit card at a rate nobody would choose, and the fund has made the situation worse rather than better. So the balance the people who manage this land on is roughly awkward enough to stop a drift into it on a Tuesday evening, reachable inside a day or two when something is genuinely wrong, inconvenient, not locked. Number 4, they know what a bare month actually costs. Not their average month, not what they usually spend. The floor, rent, power, food, transport to work, the minimum on anything that has a minimum, the number below which the lights go off. Almost nobody knows this number, and it changes everything because 3 to 6 months of expenses is a completely different target depending on which figure you use. Say your normal month is $3,200. 3 months of that is nearly $10,000. And if that's your target, you will look at it once and never begin. But your floor might be $1,900. 3 months of floor is $5,700. Still a lot, but it is a number a human being can look at without closing the tab. And it's the more honest target anyway. In an actual emergency, you are not spending an average month. You are spending the floor. The people who do this have added that number up properly rather than estimated it. And what they almost always find is that the floor sits a good deal lower than the figure they had been carrying around in their head, which means the target was never as far away as it looked. It was just never measured. Number 5, anything that arrives outside the normal pattern goes straight across. A tax refund, a shift you didn't expect, birthday money, a rebate, the month with 3 paydays in it, the refund on something you returned and had already written off. All of it moves within about a day. This is the single fastest way to build a reserve on a low income, and almost nobody uses it because unbudgeted money doesn't feel like income. It feels like a gift, and gifts feel like they're for enjoying. But look at what's actually true. You already built a life that runs without that money. Your bills were being paid before it arrived. Nothing in your month depends on it, which makes it the only money in your entire financial life that costs you nothing to save. One caution, and I mean this. If every windfall for 10 years disappears into an account nobody ever touches, that plan gets abandoned. The people who last take a piece of it and enjoy it deliberately, without guilt, and move the rest before it's been mentally spent. A plan abandoned in March saves nobody anything. Nobody sat you down and explained any of this either, did they? That's the whole reason this channel exists. Subscribe and I'll keep going through the things nobody explained. Number 6, the money is called something specific. Not savings, the car. December. The boiler. Dentist. This one sounds trivial, and it is the difference between a fund that survives and one that doesn't. Money labeled savings is money with no owner. When something goes wrong at 11 at night, savings is exactly the kind of vague that gets rated because nothing is competing for it. Money labeled the car is already promised to something. Taking it means admitting you're taking the car money, and you'd have to explain that to yourself. That tiny bit of friction inside your own head at the moment of decision stops more raids than any interest rate ever will. And there's something quieter underneath it. Naming money is planning. You cannot name a fund without imagining a specific future thing happening to you. Most people avoid that. Naming it forward, December, is a small act of expecting to still be here and still be responsible. That is not admin. That's a posture. And the practical version of this got a lot easier recently, which almost nobody has noticed. A good many banks now let one account be split into separate named pots or spaces at no cost, without opening anything new or speaking to anybody. Where that exists, 3 and 6 end up happening together. One account, several names, several small transfers. That's the entire architecture. It is not sophisticated and it is not expensive. It's just that nowhere in the system is it anybody's job to mention that it's there. Number 7, and this is where most people's system quietly fails. Your car needing tires is not an emergency. Christmas is not an emergency. The dentist is not an emergency, and neither is the annual insurance renewal that arrives at the same time every single year. Those are expected costs on an irregular schedule. They are completely different from a genuine emergency, and they need to come out of a different pot. Here's why it matters so much. If you have one fund and everything comes out of it, then the fund is permanently being drained by things that were never surprises. You never see it grow. It sits at $400 for 2 years, and you conclude that saving doesn't work for people like you. Saving worked fine. You were running a Christmas account and calling it an emergency fund. So they run 2 pots, one for things that will definitely happen but not on a schedule, one for things that genuinely should not happen at all. The second one is the one that changes a life, and it can only start growing once the first one exists to protect it. Number 8, the one I told you to stay for. You will spend it. Not might, will. The boiler will go, or the car, or somebody will need something, and the fund you spent 11 months building will drop by 2/3 in an afternoon. And here is where nearly everybody quits. Not at the start, at that moment, because it feels like proof the whole thing was pointless. All that effort and you're nearly back where you started. But look at what actually happened. The boiler broke and it got paid for. Nobody borrowed. Nobody went to a card at a rate they'd never have chosen. Nobody had to ring their mother and explain. That is the fun working perfectly. That is the entire product. It was never a trophy. It was a shock absorber. And shock absorbers are supposed to compress. The people who end up with real security are not the ones who never spent it. They are the ones who spent it, felt awful for about a week, and started again on the next payday at $10. Rebuilding is not starting over. The system already exists, and so does the habit. The second time is faster because nobody is learning it anymore. They're just running it again. So, how many of the 8 were you already doing? Look at what they have in common. Now they're all out. None of them is about earning more. Although I'll say again, income creates room, and more of it would help almost everybody here. And none of them is about spending less in the way people usually mean it. No coffee, no takeaways, no lectures about your phone bill. What they're all about is where money sits, what it's called, and when it moves. Which means that for the people who do have some room and still have no reserve, the thing in the way was rarely willpower. It was order of operations. And I'm not telling you to do any of it. I'm telling you what the people who manage this actually do differently. And what you make of that is between you and your own situation. There's a story people quote about this constantly and almost always miss the point of. Joseph, in Genesis 41, tells Pharaoh what's coming: 7 years of plenty, then 7 of famine. And here's what he actually advises. Let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming and store up grain. That food shall be a reserve for the land against the 7 years of famine. Notice what that is. It is not a prayer. It is not a virtue. It is an administrative instruction. Appoint people. Take a fixed portion. Store it in the cities. Don't touch it. And notice when it happens. Not during the famine. During the good years. The reserve was built when things were fine, by a system nobody had to feel inspired to follow. Your good years are not a decade. They are the ordinary months. The ones where nothing much goes wrong and it feels like there's nothing to save from. Those are the plentiful years. That is the whole window. There's a piece of this I couldn't fit into 19 minutes. How you have to think differently before any of the numbers move. I'm writing it down. The link's in the description if you want it when it's ready. If you have tried this before and it collapsed, I want you to hear where the fault actually sits. You were handed a target, built for a salary you don't earn, with no system attached, by people who have never once had to decide between the electric bill and the shopping. Then, when it failed, the story was that you lacked discipline. You did not lack discipline. You lacked an account in a different bank and a standing order for $10. So here's the thing I leave you with. The person you are building this for is not your children, and it isn't your future retired self on a beach somewhere. It's you, in about 14 months, on a Tuesday, when something goes wrong. She's going to open that account and find that somebody was thinking about her, quietly, $10 at a time, back when nothing was wrong and there was no reason to. Be that somebody. She's going to need you, and you are the only person who can get there in time. There's one thing people do with a fully built emergency fund that quietly costs them thousands. It feels responsible. It looks careful. And it's the reason a lot of people's savings go backwards while sitting perfectly still. One last thing. I'm not a financial advisor, and nothing in this video is personal financial advice. I'm someone who went looking for the blueprint nobody handed us, and I'm just passing on what I found. What you do with it is between you and God.